For my project, I'm building an email verification system using Amazon's simple email service. SES provides the ability to send emails programmatically and to use templating to accommodate dynamic email content. These features make the service easy to integrate into server code so that routine email sending can be automated. This is useful for systems that use transactional emails, notification emails, or for systems where emails are the product itself, like a newsletter. I'm using this idea of a newsletter to demonstrate the process of registering a user and validating that user's email address to ensure accurate delivery of mail. This will involve using SES templates to standardize the emails being sent, using programmatic email sending to send emails automatically when users register or validate their address, and using SES contact lists to keep track of users who are actively subscribed, and to provide users the opportunity to unsubscribe if they wish. This is a simple diagram of the architecture. The server will serve two HTML pages. Register.html contains the form that will be used to enter an email address and the user's name. Once the user submits that form, the server will send an email to the address built from the confirmation template that contains a verification link. Verify.html is displayed after a user clicks the verify email link, and the user's address is added to the contact list. Emails built with the newsletter template are then sent at an interval to that address. This template will contain the unsubscribe link. I'm using the JavaScript SDK to interact with SES. I wrote the server with Node, so using the JavaScript SDK makes things a little easier. New accounts are put into a sandbox, which limits the number of emails that an account can send each day to 200, and also limits the frequency to 1 email per second. An account can also only send emails to addresses that have been verified as an identity in that account. To get out of the sandbox, a formal review must be initiated with AWS, and among other things, a domain name is needed. AWS is trying to prevent people from sending large amounts of spam email, which would be very easy to do without these limitations. So to get around this, for my project, I verified 2 email addresses, one for sending and another for receiving. Verifying an email address for use with SES is pretty straightforward. Under Verified Identities, click Create Identity, Email Address, and enter the address that you want to verify. And that will send a verification email. And now under Verified Identities, that address has been verified. Setting up Node in a development environment, if it has access to a browser, is pretty straightforward. You can just download the version that you need. To get Node set up on an EC2 instance, we have to use Node Version Manager to install the version of Node that we want. So we can launch an EC2 instance and just keep everything at the default values. Give that a minute to load. All right, so I'll connect to this instance now, and we can install Node onto it. Amazon gives pretty good instructions on how to download Node onto an EC2 instance. The first thing is to curl nvm, which is just used to download Node. NVM stands for Node Version Manager. And then we just activate NVM. And then install LTS. And LTS is the version of Node that Node recommends most users to use. And then we can just test that Node is running. And we are set to go. To be able to use the JavaScript SDK, we need to create a programmatic user. So under IAM, you can select users and then create user. We'll just call this JavaScript SDK user. You can leave this unchecked. Click next. For this demo, I can just attach policies directly, and we're going to need SES full access. If everything looks good, we can create the user. And then we're going to need to generate access keys. So in the user menu, you can select create access key. And we can just do local code. And then these values are going to be copied into a file called credentials. And this is going to be put in a hidden folder called .aws in the home folder of whatever machine you're using. So the ID would go here, and then the key value itself would be pasted here. And then you also need another file called config, and this is basically just specifying the region that we're using. So I'm using US East 1. I have my server already set up in another directory, but I just created this empty directory to demonstrate how to initialize a node project. To start up a node project, we can run the command npm init in the terminal, and this will create a package.json file that just keeps track of dependencies. I'm going to be installing a few things for this project. I need to install Express to work with HTTP requests. I'm going to install body parser, and this package will take the HTML input and create a JavaScript object for easier access. And then install the SDK. And we can see that these dependencies have showed up here. Another thing we can do just to make development a little bit easier is to create a script here. So I can start the server by just running npm start. The SDK works by performing actions against a client, which is just an instance of this client class. And then instances of other classes are used to further configure those actions. So to create a verification template, for instance, we would pass in this input object that identifies the name of the template, and the other options like the subject line and then the email body. Creates an instance of this object, and then this object is passed into the send method of the client. SES uses handlebars syntax for the templating, So a JSON object is passed into an input object like this, and properties on that object are used to interpolate the values into the HTML string. So first name and last name would both be properties on that object. Handlebars also allows for some basic logic structures in the templates. So for example, with the newsletter template, I use a loop to loop over a list of articles. Each and this are keywords that will tell the template to loop over the list, and in this case the list is called articles. This Amazon SES unsubscribe URL is a stand-in for a URL that can be used to take a user off of a contact list so that they won't receive emails anymore. And Amazon automates this process. It will redirect to an HTML page that's already set up. So the next step is to actually create these templates. SES is an API-heavy service. There is actually no way to create a template in the console. You have to write programs and then run them independently to do so. So I can just run these programs with Node. And if we go to the console, we can see that a template has been added here with this name. And I can run the other program to add the newsletter template and refresh. And that also has been added here. I also need to create a contact list for users to be added to. It's a similar process. Just instantiate the client and pass in this instance of create contact list command as an argument to the send method. Now you can't actually see contact lists in the console, so you have to write yet another program to log these. This program log contact list will just print out the contact list we just created. And there's the name of it right there. I'll also be using another program that will log out the list, the actual contacts within a contact list. And this is useful to just keep track of what's going on as I go through the demo and am adding someone to the list and then unsubscribing them. So I can run this with node log contacts. And we can see that we have an empty contact list to start with. To actually send emails, we can create an instance of this send email command. And it's going to take in the input object pieces of information that will help with sending the email. So where the email is coming from, who it's going to, the name of the template we're going to use, and then the data that's going to be interpolated into the template. And it's just the same process again. We're just creating an instance of the client and then passing all of that into this send method. The newsletter email is similar, but I'm passing in this actual list of articles, and this is what gets looped over in that handlebar syntax. And this email also needs to include that unsubscribe link. So that link is activated by setting this list management options property, and you just specify the name of the contact list that you want to, that the person would be removed from. This file also will call this list contacts command, which gets all of the entries in a contact list. So I can use that to generate an array of email addresses that will be used as the to addresses value. To simulate the regular email occurrence of a newsletter, I wrote this function that will call the send email function at an interval of 10 seconds. And I just made it 10 seconds given the time constraint, especially of the shorter video. The server itself is started from this file, and this just creates a TCP server and then passes every request to this app file to further process that request. And this file also calls this email interval function. The rest of the server files may or may not be called, but this file will invariably be run, so it makes sense to call this here. The app file does some basic processing of HTTP requests. So this will just take the HTML form values and convert them into a JavaScript object. And then this routes every request to the router file. This file will look at the requested path and perform different actions based on what the path is. So the root path will render this register HTML page, and that's just the registration form. This /register route is navigated to once the user clicks the submit button in the registration form, and it just takes in those input values and then adds it to the send email function, or passes it as an argument to the send email function. And this is what actually sends the verification email. This verify path runs when the user clicks the verification or the verified link in the verification email. And this will actually create the contact in the contact list. So this specifies the name of the contact list that we want the user to be added to and the email address. And then again, that's passed into the send method. And then it renders the verified HTML page, just indicating to the user that their address has been verified. To begin the demo, I will start up the server and navigate to the home page. Fill out the registration form, and just making sure that I use that email that was already verified with AWS. And clicking submit should send a verification email. And just note that my name appears here as we would expect given the template. So clicking verify email will redirect to another confirmation page. Because the server is running, I just have another terminal window open so we can check the contact list. And we can see that contact has been added with that email address. Unsubscribe all is set to false, so that means that this user will be receiving newsletter emails. And we can see that they've started to come in. These links are active. And we have this unsubscribe button here, so if we click that, this page I didn't have to set up. SES just sets that up for you, and then you can unsubscribe. Running log contacts again, and we can see that unsubscribe all has been set to true. So if I go back to my inbox and refresh, we're at 6 right now. I refresh a few times and we're not getting any more emails. So this user's been unsubscribed.